This video summarizes how our prices in Cloudbeds get pushed out to Hostelworld, how they appear on Hostelworld's public site, how new bookings arrive in Cloudbeds, and how Cloudbeds accounts for what was already prepaid in commissions to Hostelworld by the guest, what guest info arrives with the new bookings, how you can add special fees or taxes to only Hostelworld bookings, like not other OTAs, how to add nights to a booking manually, what happens if a guest requests you change the room type or amount of people, and how the pricing gets affected when a guest asks to shorten their stay. Basically, everything you could possibly ever want to know about dealing with Hostelworld bookings in Cloudbeds, I'm going to cover today in this video. Okay, so first things first, in the settings and then property configuration, taxes and fees section, you need to make sure that all of your different fees or taxes or anything are created. So for Hostelworld in particular, we have a room tax of 13.25% that can be added on top of the base rate that they booked at. And we have a $6.80 amenity fee. It's a flat fee per person per night that we need to set up. Let's see here. Deposit, of course, a $10 deposit per person is set up. And we also use card fees. So that's $1 per person per night if they pay by card, but we just auto put those on reservations. And then after you have all the possible fees and taxes you want auto added into any Hostelworld reservation, you go to reservation sources, third-party sources, and of course, hopefully Hostelworld and hostel bookers have been enabled and set up already. And so you manually just I manually added room tax, card fee, deposit, and the $6.80 amenity fee. I just added it using this edit button so that any Hostelworld booking that comes in, it will come in with Hostelworld's base rate that the person booked at per night, and it adds all these taxes and fees on top of that base rate. And of course, before we connect to Hostelworld, we want to set up our base nightly price, any availability restrictions, length of stay requirements, like we need to set all that up in Cloudbeds. So for the example I'm showing you today, you would do that in rates and availability matrix, and we're going to look at these dates, February 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th. We had a booking come in for these prices exactly, $25 on the weekend, and $13 per night the next 2 nights. And of course we have, if we want to view more than price, you can view more than price. So that shows you how many are allotted for sale. We don't have a minimum or maximum length of stay or any of these other things set up for the dates we're going to look at today. Don't worry if you want to push out slightly more expensive prices to like OTAs in general. This is just your kind of minimum possible rate that you usually want to push out to your own personal website bookings. If you want OTAs to be a little more expensive, I'll show you how to do that soon. And of course, you want all of your room types set up. So today we're going to be looking at a 10-bed mixed sex dorm, but we actually have a unique type of room type for Hostelworld specifically, because they're designed to use per person pricing, which Cloudbeds has written an article about this and like the restrictions of that. So our typical private room, for example, when we send it out to OTAs, it's the maximum amount that we allow OTAs to book, like amount of people, is 1 or 2 people. And it's $49 regardless of if 1 person books or 2 people book. Any more that book, it's better if they book direct with us or website, on our website, that sort of thing. But when we used to push these prices out to Hostelworld, since they have per person pricing, so this is about $50. If two people want to book a private room, it's $50. But if one person wants to book a private, it's listed as $25, which is not how our pricing structure works. So we had to basically compromise and set up a special private room for Hostelworld people. Obviously, there's a maximum of one person who can book it, and they book it at $50. Of course, when they arrive, we can always change their booking to add more people at the correct price, basically. But it's just a workaround, so you might have to create something like this. If, like us, you have something that should be the same price for one or two people, Hostelworld's per person pricing structure doesn't like that. So anyway, we created a one-person private specifically for Hostelworld. Although people who, come directly, they can also book into the one-person private room. It's just this only goes out to Hostelworld and Hostelworld alone. And then otherwise, people can make direct bookings into this by being a walk-in or phone booker or something. And because we only really set up one of our private rooms to be connected to Hostelworld in terms of availability, we actually allow for an overbooking. So if somebody checks into our room, or like room 16, and we mark them in-house, we can't move them out of the way, but somebody can still book over them because we allow for an overbooking. And just when those people show up, we just move them into a regular private room because same pricing, same structure. We just kind of assign the reservation to just a regular private room. That's a whole other story on how we do it, but it's definitely possible. So we technically allow for overbookings, and that's just how our hostel works. And of course, we always undersell our regular privates in case we do have to move a Hostelworld private into those room types. So there's always space available, basically. And of course, you want to make sure before you make the connection between Hostelworld and Cloudbeds that you have all your fees and such listed on Hostelworld extranet as well. So in property setup tax details, we mention our tax percentage as well as our resort fee, as well as like our card fee. And keep in mind, we didn't used to have amenity fees on Hostelworld, and it really took a while to get it approved. So the sooner you start requesting these be added to your property, the better. And then, of course, if you go to rates and availability and then add edit room type, make sure that all your room types are set up properly. So we have our single private set up with a maximum number of guests 1. This is how our 10 bed is set up, just so you can take a peek. Our 6 bed mixed sex dorm. And the 6 bed female only dorm. Also, something you'll notice in this video that's particular to our property, if you go to rates and availability and then, just the first tab, we have on all of our room types a non-refundable rate listed at a discount of 33%. You'll see why. Like, basically, we only want people to book non-refundable rates because we always pre-charge the first night and all the fees and taxes on the first night, and we don't want them to view that as refundable ever. So we just prefer to push out our rates at a much higher price on Hostelworld, and then we just discount it back to our regular prices. So let me show you the exact dates that we're going to be using in this video. So I went to February 21st, and then these days. Okay, so remember in Cloudbeds I showed you that the first 2 nights that we're going to look at are $25, and the last 2 nights are $13. because of how we push out the rates, it's close to our standard base rates that we set up in Cloudbeds, but not exact. And I'll show you exactly how this happens. So we push out our $25 rate at 50% more expensive to Hostelworld, and that's the standard rate right here. And then the non-refundable rate then discounts at 33%, which gets almost exactly back to what our base rate was on Cloudbeds. I'll show you more about that next. I feel like Hostelworld did send us a message on how to get only our non-refundable rate to show, but it just didn't work out with Cloudbeds, if I recall correctly. But yeah. So let me show you a little bit more here. So if you go to the settings area, channel distribution, and then channels, we can see everybody we're connected to here. Let's go to Hostelworld. It's already connected. But if I go deeper into it, I'll see a few things. Okay. So our Hostelworld one person only private in Cloudbeds then gets pushed to our standard single private in suite on Hostelworld. 6-bed mixed sex dorm, 6-bed mixed sex dorm. There are, like, the regular private room is not set to connect to anything on Hostelworld, so we don't push out our prices for those or availability. We don't book those on Hostelworld. 10-bed to 10-bed, 6-bed female only to 6-bed female only. We have other room types, but we don't connect them all to Hostelworld because they're like weird types or like staff dorms or something like that. So you can pick and choose which room types you connect to any OTA, really. After you decide what connects to what, okay, just click OK there. This is where you could choose to increase your base price. So we push out our regular rate of, $25 a night or something like that as 50% higher when we push those rates to Hostelworld, only because we discount it 33% when it finally gets to Hostelworld. You could do that for a percentage. You can increase or decrease by percentage, or just flat fees, like plus or minus $1, plus or minus $2, that sort of thing. So that's how it's set up in that way, to be more expensive, pushed out to Hostelworld, and that was it. Really, that's all the settings you could do. So I showed you how you can permanently block like your 12-bed dorm from ever being bookable on Hostelworld, and that's just by not connecting them at all, Cloudbeds and Hostelworld for that particular room type. But there's something else called closeouts as well if you want to temporarily block something. So you select a start date, end date, you pick which connected OTA you want to block and what room type you want to block. So for example, maybe you're setting up prices and you want to make sure that the prices are pushing out correctly to Hostelworld before you actually allow people to book it on Hostelworld. Or you're dealing with, like when we were originally setting up private rooms on Hostelworld, we used closeouts to like temporarily block things until the price situation was clear to us, like how to proceed. So you can use this as well for something more temporary. One other thing to consider before making the connection is, do you want to pre-charge Hostelworld bookers at all, and how much do you want to charge? So if you go to policies, if you select deposit, you pick how much Cloudbeds attempts to charge the reservation as soon as it comes in from Hostelworld into Cloudbeds. You could do a percentage, fixed amount. We chose first day price, including all the taxes and fees associated with the first day. So for us, it's first day base price, first day's taxes, first day's amenity fees, card fees, and as well as the deposit, because the deposit always goes on to the first night. So that's how we set it up. I don't recommend, if you're in the US, doing like the full amount, because the amount of chargebacks on no-shows and stuff in card not present environments is terrible. So we try to keep our pre-charges to a minimum. We only charge the first day so that if they do no-show or cancel or whatever at last minute, we at least still collected for the room that they blocked up. Our neighbors do a much smaller amount and they don't get any chargebacks at all. So it's up to you what you want to set it up as. And if you do want to set it up, I think you go to payment options, and then you scroll down to Hostelworld, Hostel Bookers, and decide, do you want the, Cloudbeds to not charge Hostelworld bookings at all when they come in? Do you want to authorize the credit card instead of actually charging it? Or do you want to process the payment and actually charge for the amount of the deposit you just set up? And you can decide if you want to perform the action immediately upon the reservation coming into Cloudbeds, or you could choose to postpone it. Of course, in order to do this, you need to connect to a payment gateway, which I think took one of our managers multiple days to ultimately connect to First Data and have it work on Cloudbeds. But it is amazing and definitely worth the time. So as soon as a Cloudbed or a Hostelworld reservation comes in, we attempt to charge them all the first night fees and base rate and all of that. And because it imports Hostelworld credit card numbers into the reservation, which I'll show you later as well, it attempts to charge the person, but it doesn't cancel the reservation if the charge didn't go through. Of course, Hostelworld does not allow reservations to go through where they don't collect their own 15% or whatever commission. So in that sense, people with completely bogus cards can't book on Hostelworld. But there are plenty of people who have limited funds on the credit card they booked with, and so when we try to charge them the first night, it doesn't go through. And so we don't cancel the reservation unless it's like a completely full night or something. Otherwise, we just keep it and just assume they'll show up and pay anyway with a different card. And of course, you can have your managers manually attempt to charge the card later as well. And so I think this is all the setup that one needs to do before they connect to Hostelworld. If you're not ready to officially switch to Cloudbeds yet, I don't recommend connecting my allocator to Hostelworld yet. So you wouldn't set this up, for example, like leave it black like this until you are truly ready to receive bookings into Cloudbeds, because your reception staff is now trained to handle it and all that stuff. So, of course, this is a step where you might have to wait before doing anything else. Okay, so once you do finally connect Hostelworld to Cloudbeds, I search the dates that we're going to look at today. Search them. It lists all of our local competitors in the area, and you can see that it lists our price as the average of all the nights. So we want to look for 4 nights, the 21st, and then for 4 nights. As you remember, the first 2 nights were 25, the last 2 nights were 13 in a 10-bed mixed-sex dorm, and the average, of course, is 19. So yeah, they're just saying that the average per night cost is 19 for one person. So let's look and see how we appear. So, prices. Okay, good. This is the first type. So it says the average is $19.09 per night. And then, so that's for the non-refundable rate. And, again, it's not 19, it's 19.09 just because we up the price by 50%, which is here, and then we decrease the price by 33% for the non-refundable rate. So it's very, very close to the average of 25 and 13. Let's see what other interesting things though. First, I believe in the house rules is where they list our fees. So unfortunately, a lot of this is maybe the worst OTA right now in demonstrating our amenity fees. Oh, they didn't even change it to per a night per person. That's the thing with Hostelworld. They control how things appear on their site. You can try to improve it in the little extranet environment, but sometimes they just don't change it. So this is incorrect. It's $680 amenity fee per person per night, and I distinctly remember changing it, and they changed it back, obviously. And then it warns about card fees, room taxes, deposit, that sort of thing. But unless they click house rules and scroll down, they're never going to see that, unfortunately. We used to have a little bit more control of where things appear, but it's not ideal right now. So anyway, the average person who books, they see $19.09. You could view price breakdown. Yep. That looks correct. So it'll always show the average there of the dates they're asking to book. And we're going to choose one bed. I believe. One second. Okay. And this is just $19.09 times 4, literally. It doesn't include any mention of taxes at this point. And they literally take 15%, at least right now, is the Hostelworld's take. So this is what they're going to prepay to Hostelworld. Okay, and then let's see what happens when we press book now. Of course, you enter in your information, credit card stuff. Again, it summarizes just the base rates alone, what they're going to pay to Hostelworld, which is literally 15% of just the base rate, no taxes. And only in this part do they summarize, additional fees. Okay, so I got a calculator out so we can figure out what exactly these numbers are actually showing, because they don't specify that some of these are amenity fees or what it includes exactly. So we know for this particular guest, $19.09 is the rate for 4 nights, just for one person. And there's a 1.1325, just adding the tax onto it. So that's just generally the rate with tax. And then let's see here. What's 680 times 4? So we want to add our amenity fees. So there's 4 amenity fees, and the total is that. Plus 4 card fees, because it's 1 per person per night, and we're booking 1 person for 4 nights. So that, and then if we subtract what Hostelworld is taking right now, I think that's going to be this number. Ooh, God. It's close. 103, 106. Wonder why that is. 1 second. I think I know what happened. So this was my base rate with tax. I think I added the wrong amount for 4 nights of amenity fees. And then I added 4 for card fees. And then if we subtract $11.45 for what was prepaid to Hostelworld, nope. You know what, I'm just not going to worry. That's close enough to what I just calculated. I'm not going to go into the minutia of this. And then this number, even tinier, it says balance payable to the property includes this amount. So that includes apparently all amenity fees, all taxes, and the... Oh, I see. What I forgot is that we only list our first night's card fees on, whatchamacallit. Anyway, I shouldn't have added 4 card fees. I should have just added 1 because it's one person. I don't know exactly. But anyway, we only, Hostelworld didn't want us to list our per night, per person card fees because that's not a guaranteed charge, whereas the first night's card fees is almost 100% guaranteed because we always try to charge the first night's card fees when the booking comes in. So anyway, that's why it's 103, not 106. Cool. So those match. And then apparently this number here is right. So it's all the amenity fees, all taxes, and of course just the first night's card fees. So I believe, so again, the amenity fees for 4 nights is $27.02 plus 1 card fee plus, let me calculate the taxes on a separate thing. So times 4 nights. So that's about $10. And about that. Yeah. So obviously, yeah. Okay, so this is not all they're paying. They're actually paying a deposit as well. So how they calculate things are weird. Anyway, obviously this can get really confusing, not only for me, but the people actually booking. And I don't think they read this. So fair warning, that's how they sum up your taxes and any additional fees you have listed on Hostelworld. Let's also go back a little bit and kind of undo. I wanted to show you one more thing. So if I search for, let's just do one of these nights. Let's do it on Monday. Oops. Do this to that. For 2 guests, I wanted to show you something. Okay. So it still breaks down the per person pricing for that night. Here's the problem is, the only way, this is the Hostelworld private. If you remember, only one person can be in it in order for the pricing to be correct. Even though I searched for 2 people, 2 guests, it still popped up as an option, even though it also says sleeps 1. So, we've had problems with people booking for multiple people, and not seeing this part as a restriction. FYI. And ideally in the future, if someone was searching for 2 people, this wouldn't even pop up as an option in theory, but it does on Hostelworld. Also keep in mind, when I was doing the pricing summary thing, of course, how they summarize is not ideal at the moment, especially if you are a property that needs to use amenity or resort fees. We hate them, but we have to use them, basically. The confirmation email from Hostelworld is just the same. Like, it adds up things in a confusing way so that people think when they arrive they have to pay less than they actually do. So we always send all of our guests through a Cloudbeds custom email, like the day before they arrive, summarizing basically, hey guys, you may have received an email that says you'll only owe like a certain amount when you arrive. That is not true. Here's all the fees that you agreed to. Just keep those in mind, sort of thing. That way, our reception desk has a chance of getting less complaints when people show up. Okay, so I've showed you everything about how to set up Hostelworld stuff on their extranet and on Cloudbeds. Now I showed you how all the pricing appears when things are connected. Next, I'm going to show you what a new booking looks like when it appears in Cloudbeds and kind of what happens with it. So this is a real guest reservation we've received that's going to check in the future. If this person tried to book with an invalid card, like there's no money on it or it's not a real number or something like that, Hostelworld would have blocked it from coming in. So at the very least, they expect to receive Hostelworld's commission payment first. And then they send in the reservation only if the credit card was valid into ours. And it also, whatchamacallit, sends the credit card to us. So this is what happened. The room in a 10-bed dorm was added. Then their credit card was added. Cloudbeds immediately processed their first night's payment and all taxes and fees successfully. It doesn't always happen successfully. Usually it'll try, but it's not a guarantee it'll work. But this one, it did work. It assigned a specific room and bed afterwards. Let's see here. And the status was marked as confirmed. And this is just, we received the reservation. An invoice is always created automatically by the system when the booking comes in. And then I've added some notes since. If you look at up here, it gives us the check-in and check-out date, the total amount of nights for the reservation, the total amount of guests. This is just supposed to be a summary. So if like one of the guests was here for one night and another for two, it would just say 2 nights. And it would say 2 guests for that as well. Says when the reservation was made. If gender is there, it'll mark it. This isn't true of all OTAs. They don't always tell you gender as far as I'm aware. Estimated arrival time, we never listen to this, and sometimes it's unknown, so it doesn't matter. And then its source, of course, is Hostelworld and Hostel Bookers, because they're like the same thing. It gives us the source ID or reservation ID number, so that's different. If I would log into Hostelworld Extranet right now, this would be this person's particular number. And they booked the non-refundable rate, which is again kind of our cheaper rate that still mimics our normal base rate. So it was $25.25 and then $13.13 for the 4 nights. So let me show you some other interesting things as well. So for Hostelworld, it gives you like numbers. So the price, I guess, what was it? 1909 times 4. Yeah, so that was exactly the 1909, which was the average, times 4 is 76.60. Sorry, 30. I have to stay away from the computer in order to use my microphone. Sorry. Let's see here. And then the 11.45 was the commission that Hostelworld already collected. And then it lists the remaining total, which let me think about where that comes from. Okay, so now that I look at it, the remaining total, the bottom number here, is just the price listed minus the commission. So it's not the remaining total that the person owes. It's just like the remaining part of the subtotal, which is just the base price. It has nothing to do with our amenity fees or card fees or taxes or anything like that. Okay, and then because we attached amenity fees and card fees and deposits to the Hostelworld source in Cloudbeds, those get automatically added for the correct amount of nights, correct amount of people. So this is the correct amount of amenity fees, card fees for their entire stay, and deposits. Since it's only one person, it's just a $10 deposit, and then it adds the tax to this subtotal here. Right, so their subtotal here is not the $76 because they already prepaid part of that. It's listed as $64.91. So they no longer have to like repay or have tax calculated on the part that they already prepaid to Hostelworld. So let me show you another way of looking at this as well. So if you go to quick edit, this is where you add nights or subtract nights. Remember that they were supposed to pay $25 the first night, $25 the second, $13, and then $13. But these prices are less, and that's because this is $25. If you remove 15% of that, it's $21.36. And same with $13 and $11.10. So the way that Hostelworld commissions are taken off the price in Cloudbeds is they take it off per night. So it's actually kind of awesome. Our old system, we used to, if like the person showed up and actually wanted to shorten their stay, we had to reduce the full like $11 or whatever, so that they didn't accidentally get like an excessive discount. Now, like if someone just wants to shorten, that's fine. They lose the $2 here, $2 discount here, $2 discount here, $2 discount here, but they keep it on the night that they actually stay, what they prepaid in commission. So it's very good if you got a lot of people changing their length of stay for Hostelworld, and you don't want to train your receptionist on how to still maintain or not accidentally give them an excessive discount, which I guess you might understand if you had a PMS system that did that, like was bad at dealing with Hostelworld commissions, like our previous one. But if you didn't deal with that before, don't worry about it. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is Hostelworld lists our amenity fees and all these things because we put it on Hostelworld's extranet for people to expect to pay taxes and other stuff on top of the base price. But with Hostelworld's connection to Cloudbeds, they only send us a nightly price. And not just the nightly price, but the nightly price minus the like 15% the person already prepaid. It's up to you to set up Cloudbeds so that all the taxes and stuff are added onto all Hostelworld reservations properly, basically. Keep in mind that anything that is here, like that's auto added on all Hostelworld reservations, it also will appear and be auto calculated on any adding nights for this person. So if this person wants to add a 5th night, they'll just be able to book it at our base rate. So if you click at it, you see the next night is just $13. So I can add $13 on the reservation, and it will, when it adds the night, it will also add one amenity fee for one person, one card fee for that person. It won't auto add deposits because I didn't add a person, I just added the night, that sort of thing. So anything you have kind of added to Hostelworld, it gets automatically calculated if the person shortens their stay or adds nights to their stay. So some things aren't going to work out well. So if this person booked a refundable rate at the like 50% higher price, when this person adds nights, it's not gonna display that here. It's still only gonna show them our $13 price. It doesn't pull the refundable rate from Hostelworld or anything. It just shows them our normal kind of base prices. And remember, online, if they had booked, it would have said like 1303 or something weird like that, because of the way we calculate non-refundable. So anyway, this just goes with extensions. It just looks at what our base prices, our normal base prices are set at. It doesn't care what actually is displayed on Hostelworld's website for that particular rate plan. So what this means is if you like to say charge 5% more to book on OTAs or something like that, like you would set up your price at $13, and then in the channel distribution section you'd say, okay, all Hostelworld bookings, please make them 5% more expensive. Someone books on Hostelworld, their nightly price will be 5% more than someone who just books directly with us. But as soon as they start adding nights, that extra 5%, it's not going to show up on their extensions, because unless you added it here somewhere, but there's no good way to do that with Cloudbeds, I guess. Like you can add an extra 5% charge on Cloudbeds or whatever, but it's not going to be completely fair because the guest prices already came at 5% higher. Then on top of that, they get another 5% added here. So their original booking is actually going to be like 10% higher or something like that. which is not what you're going for, I guess. So getting the correct prices for adding nights for different scenarios, depending on how complicated you want to make things, sometimes it's just not possible. So I guess what I'm trying to say is percentage things, unless it's like taxes, it's not a good type of fee to add to your Cloudbeds taxes and fees section. We have much better luck with flat fees, like $1 per person per night, $6.80 per person per night, that sort of thing. Deposit just one per person. They work a lot better in keeping things accurate when you're adding nights or subtracting nights. Also notice that the suggested deposit, that's the first night plus all the taxes and fees on the first night. That's up here. Whether this person was successfully charged or not, that would be up here. And of course, the amount they already prepaid and was pre-charged is there, and it matches. As far as I'm aware, Cloudbeds still does not have a way to notify you specifically if a card doesn't go through. There are reports that will show you this, like the payment processing report. Or you could generate other reports with like new reservations or something like that to look for these, or balance due reservations, something like that. You have to look for people whose cards don't go through. We don't chase them specifically anymore. And there's no way to have settings so that it cancels if the card doesn't go through. You have to manually go in and find people with invalid cards and cancel them. We only do that really on like 100% full nights, where we manually go in, see who hasn't prepaid anything, and we're like, you need to give us a valid card now or it's going to be canceled. And if you rebook, it's going to be higher prices, that sort of thing. And also for our specific payment processor, and I think all of Cloudbeds, but I'm not sure, if the full suggested deposit right here is not collected, it doesn't try to charge less. It doesn't try like $20 or $5 or anything like that. It only tries this amount once. And I don't think you can schedule it to attempt to recharge again either. But you can attempt to manually charge the person. Any manager who has the permissions to process payments can go in and try to manually charge again. By the way, when we were new to Cloudbeds maybe a year and a half ago, Hostelworld credit card numbers were not automatically imported. I don't know if Cloudbeds or Hostelworld or somebody updated their system so that the credit cards automatically got sent to us. So that was nice. So we just recently began to start connecting them to our pre-charge system. We used to charge reservations in full, which is not good for chargebacks, by the way. Don't do that. But we have found in my long history here at the hostel that Hostelworld credit cards tend to be valid credit cards with a decent amount of money on them, because you need to have money on the card in order to book in the first place. So that's a random factoid, I guess. Let me actually show you what the pre-charge looks like. So if I go to the folio, I see a credit, because it's a credit is like an actual successful charge or a refund. Debit's like just adding items to a folio, basically. But it has the date and time, and it has credit card, specifically what type of card, the last four. And this is the difference between any processed payment and not processed payment, is it says processed. So in this case, it says payment processed. If it were a refund, it would say refund processed. So that's different than somebody like charging their card on the terminal. And if you're having issues with people checking in with the correct credit cards, just note that every single receptionist has access to this credit card page, which it blacks out a lot of the information, but they can still, the the receptionist still sees the last four, sees what kind of card and the name on the card and stuff. So they can double check to make sure that the charge that went through on the folio, is actually the person's card, which prevents fraud, of course. So at our particular property, we do not allow receptionists to process payments through Cloudbeds. We only allow them to do it through a terminal that we have specifically at reception. So they can evaluate if the process charge was valid or not. And if it wasn't valid, we have a little system that says, card didn't match. Right. So if the person was charged $41.99 into a card that's not theirs or something, then we just add something called card didn't match $41.99. Continue. And we have the guests pay the full amount. So that essentially adds $41.99 and zeroes out the payment they already made. And so our receptionist collects this remainder amount, and then tomorrow the manager can go back and refund that prepayment of $41.99, and we will have still collected the full 4 nights of payment. And one more thing, this rate, this special rate, non-refundable, usually it would say base rate or something like that. It only says this if you never make any changes to the fundamental reservation. So if you add a night, this will say base rate. If you subtract a night, actually I don't know if this will say refundable or base rate. Since subtracting it is a little different than adding. If you change room types, it will just say base rate. If that sort of thing. This changes when you change anything about a reservation at all. I think this section of the video will be where I talk about a lot of the most common what if scenarios that I have to deal with. There's actually quite a bit more I could talk about when it comes to Hostelworld, including like how to import a Hostelworld reservation if you're switching systems or something like that. Of course, it's custom to how you set up your prices and everything. But anywho, so let me just go over some of the common what ifs in our case. So what if on Hostelworld the guest goes into Hostelworld and shortens their stay, or they add nights to their stay, or cancel or something? Hostelworld always maintains an open connection to Cloudbeds, so they can make changes like that themselves, I believe. There might be restrictions on like one day before they arrive, they can't make changes or something like that. So I don't know. I think it depends on how your property is set up. But yes, just like any other channel manager, Cloudbeds keeps an open connection with Hostelworld. Okay, one more scenario. So what if, like us, you overbook your Hostelworld one-person private? We only have one room, but we allow for 2 bookings. Like, what do you do with the second person that arrives? Let me show you how I do that. Okay, so on this day, we have practice reservation there, and then on our unassigned area, we also have another one for the Hostelworld one-person practice. Obviously, we can't put them both in just the one room we have available. So I would click on this one, and I would go to the regular private room, click there, and just assign it there. And it just so happens to be the same exact price, but usually if this were actually a Hostelworld reservation, it would want to charge more because remember, Hostelworld people get a discount nightly because they already prepay part of it. So it always tries to recalculate to our existing prices, which is usually more. And so I would always press override the price. Of course, the one that exists here in the normal Hostelworld private, we can always move it up and override the price keep the same price they booked with. If they do show up with a additional person in their one person private, like you can't add the person if they still remain in the Hostelworld one person private section. They have to be moved to a regular private room. So let me show you, just demonstrate that. This is the one in the one person private. This is room 16, this guy. So say I want to change this one, the one that's in the Hostelworld private. There is no way to add a second adult in there. Let me see if I could just straight do it here. Update. I'll probably unassign the reservation is my guess and add a person. Updates. Okay. Yep. It just moved them to a private room and added a second person to that one. I have multiple private rooms listed here. Yeah, so there's no way to add a person without using the edit reservation button, which will always recalculate the subtotal to what the current prices are. So it will take away any Hostelworld discount. It will automatically recalculate how many amenity fees need to be there, card fees, how many deposits. So I guess that's good, but it never warns you that it's charging more or charging less for the base rate. So, and anytime you use edit reservation button, for example, to add a person to a private room, any type of private room, it won't let you. It won't warn you about price changes if you're upcharging or downcharging. It won't tell you that. Some of our biggest problems is when we have a multi-night Hostelworld one-person private reservation. So say they're here for 3 nights. They tell the receptionist, hey, on the second night, I'm going to have a second person on my reservation. And the receptionist doesn't actually move them out of, in our case, room 16, which is our Hostelworld private. If the receptionist marks them as in-house there, and then the next day the second person arrives, you literally cannot add a person again, because if the person's in the Hostelworld private, it has an occupancy limit of 1. So we've had our receptionists have to manually add amenity fees, manually add card fees, manually add deposits, and this won't reflect how many guests they have, how many keys the person needs to return when they check out. If the person extends, they're going to be extending at a one-person private price, which is going to be very confusing. So we always tell our receptionists, like, if a Hostelworld person is going to add a person later, you need to move them to a regular private, because it is literally 100 times more of a hassle to deal with them while they're in a Hostelworld private room when they have multiple people versus just moving them to a regular private room that can hold as many as 6 people in their occupancy. One other kind of common issue we have is we have a 10-bed dorm, which is only for people who could show that they're actively traveling internationally. This is common for hostels, maybe not hotels. So a lot of people book our 10 beds because it's the cheapest price, obviously, including myself. I was a guest here, and I booked a 10 bed even though I didn't have, I wasn't traveling internationally at the time. So, I had to be moved to a 6-bed dorm, which costs about, well, now it's $3 more. Amenity fees and stuff are the same. It's just the base price increase is $3 plus tax per night. And the extra problem with, and also those people are to pay the increased price, right? They booked a 10-bed without looking at the rules and regulations for that particular room. They don't get to keep the discount just because they didn't read, So normally we do charge them the additional $3, of course. So with Hostelworld in particular, as an OTA, when that happens, it's really hard to get the right price for them. So in the calendar, we would drag the reservation to the 6-bed mixed-sex dorm. And not only does it want to tack on the additional $3 per night, usually, I mean, prices do change quite a bit, but but it will also want to add back on the part that the person prepaid in commission, right? So if they booked at $13, but their nightly price in our system actually says $11, right? And we're now moving them to a $16 room. So it's going to say it's $5 more per night for that person. Instead of moving from $13 to $16, a $3 difference, it's now moving from $11 to $16, a $5 difference per night. Any changes in room type will zero out any prepaid commission. So it's always a little bit of hassle when Hostelworld people want to change their room types, or they're forced to change their room types because they don't qualify. Getting a price that's fair really is kind of hard. So we don't even have like a good system for addressing this. Like, I personally can get them like the perfect price, factoring in their commissions, and I guess we could train the receptionists on certain things with that. But it seems very complicated, and I've had people, receptionists, excessively given a discount. Like, they've been here a while and they see that there's a commission that the person prepaid, but they don't know how to handle it properly, which, I don't know. That's a management issue. But most people don't realize that their commission is being zeroed out. Like, they're getting no discount for prepaying part of it. So luckily, like, most people are bad at math and don't notice it, because it's really a hassle to get an accurate price if we have to change them room types and also increase what we're having them pay. Like, there's a few options, but we haven't really settled on one in the year and a half we've moved to Cloudbeds. Same deal with people who book a dorm and want to move to a private. It will always recalculate and want to charge what the current private base prices are, which is, zeroes out the commission that the person prepaid. Also, it's a little bit harder if it's not a one-person. This is just a Cloudbeds issue. If it's not a one-person dorm and they want to move to a private, like, you can't drag both of the dorm reservations into private rooms. It's just a weird process. But that's not a Hostelworld issue. That's just a Cloudbeds issue. So I could do a video on like very complicated calendar movements. So yeah. Oh, and by the way, when you drag a reservation to a different room type and ask it to like recalculate the prices and stuff, it will always give you many options. One is like, was this a mistake? Press the cancel button. And then it will always give you an override option, which means keep the prices that exist right now, please. Like, that's what override means. And then it will either give you an upcharge or a downcharge, a button. Prices change up and down all the time. Sometimes when we move people rooms, it really asks if we want to downcharge, because that person booked at like a really high priced time, and then we realized we wouldn't be as full as we thought, so we started decreasing the prices. So you have to train your receptionist on dealing with that error code as well. But I think that'll be it for Hostelworld today. I've now stepped into just general Cloudbeds territories, but now you see how to set everything up in Cloudbeds, how it gets pushed out to Hostelworld, how Hostelworld pushes it back to us and just maintains a connection, and what the prices and everything look like. There are many other topics, I'm sure, but I think that's as complete as a manager look as I would like to go today. Let me know if you have any specific videos you want to see, and I could, of course, make them or attempt to make them. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.